Hello, everybody. Welcome to Comedian MTG. My name is Ian, and for the first time in a very long time, I have
like almost 2 years
a guest, and specifically that guest is my co-host from the Mind Sculptors, Callahan. So let me pitch this episode and why things are a little different. So right now, I had Lotus Event 6, but this is a Chaos tournament online. Had a one free day, couldn't travel to any tournaments because I have things going on Sunday, but I have enough time to do an online tournament. Haven't done one in a long time. Kind of excited. It's a top 10 cut nowadays, so kind of fixes some of the draw issues with online play. Loving that part. And we'll see how many people show up, how many sign up. I do that whole thing. And I was looking for decks, and that's kind of how we got here. I was looking for decks, and Cal was like, for the love of God, Ian, just play Ardenn.
Just give it a chance.
Yeah. I mean, I've been saying no to that proposal for a really long time. So it's kind of how we got here. So first of all, Cal's gonna give my the elevator pitch for this deck tech. I'm mostly convinced at this point after doing a bit of gold fishing and making a few changes with my own version. But because you've been playing this deck on Moto a lot, right?
Mm-hmm. I played a lot of leagues this week with it. And I haven't been able to 3-0 anything. Mm-hmm. I've had a couple 3-0s stolen from me from either misclicking or Moto working weird.
Woof.
And so just a couple 3-0s away from getting some trophies, but overall I was going I had mostly 2-1s with this list over the past week.
We love to see that. We love to see it. So this is the list that you've been working on this deck for a really long time. I know you took a break from working on it, but you and I talked about the original version of this deck, 2022, right? I feel like.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Yeah. So it's been a hot minute. Because this was the first Ardenn pairing that I was even interested in, right? Because I saw you playing it and it played so differently from the other ones. The other ones kind of played very control-y, very stacksy, right? Whereas Turbo Blade, I think the original version you called it, right? Is a lot more, turbo out Godo, turbo out Adnaz, a lot, it's sort of this hybridized strategy, right?
Yeah, the general idea of the deck, and this is a recent conceptualization that I've kind of come up with through playing it way more, because one of the advantages of MTGO is I've just been playing more reps on these decks, so I get a better feel of the deck.
Sure.
And it really, I feel like the comparison I make a lot is Ardenn feels very much like Malcolm for equipment. And so as Malcolm is for pirates, Ardenn tends to be for equipment. And the way that looks is different, but it is mana advantage. You're cheating those equip costs, which makes equipment much better. But the way that Ardenn is able to leverage equipment is extraordinarily unique.
The biggest interaction being that with Skull Clamp, right? That's the the biggest thing
is that Ardenn lets you target any permanent or player and attach any number of auras or equipment you control to that permanent, and then state-based actions take effect. And so one of the things is that this preys on decks that play a lot of X1s with Skull Clamp, because the way it will work is you'll play a Skull Clamp with Ardenn, you'll go to your combat step, you'll target the X1, you'll put Skull Clamp on it, it'll die to state-based actions, you'll draw 2 cards because you control the Skull Clamp.
Right.
And where it gets really messy is that it also plays Masterwork of Ingenuity, which is basically a second Skull Clamp, and because of the way that state-based actions work, you can double clamp X1s and draw 4 cards. So it's just you see a lot of cards.
And so the thing I was the most skeptical about is how often this comes up, right? But I'm kind of going into this tournament with an open mind to it, right? And the thing that more sold me towards the end of this process was the consistency in which I was feeling like I was getting these turn 2, turn 3 hands, whether it's, Adnaz pretty early on, but that less so than just the early Godos, right? Because for those who don't know, Ardenn plus Godo is a 2-card combo in the sense that you play Godo, fetch out Helm of the Host, and then Ardenn's ability triggers combat, you slap it right on the Godo can beat down, you win, right? So hence the comparison to Malcolm Glinthorn, right? It feels pretty apt in that sense, right? You basically have this like Mardu Turbo Shell with a 1-card combo sort of baked into it that you can play pretty aggressively, right?
Yeah. And because of Black's ability to reanimate and kind of accelerate at a pace that like other color pairings don't really get, you're able to do this as early as turn 1.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of shocking how quick it can be.
Yeah, the turn 1s are tougher, right? Because you need 9 mana, but I've goldfished a number of turn 2s like pretty easily. They're just not bad at all. So that's kind of the conceit of the deck, and then the rest of the deck just like good value Mardu pieces, right? And then the grind plan is like a lot of the Skull Clamp plan. There's a little history of it too. So you were working on this list. I know you sent it to Phoenix. I know you played against Freedom Waffle, sent it to him. Everyone's kind of made adjustments to it. Then you and I talked about it I think 5 days ago at this point, maybe even more recently than that, like 3 days.
Yeah.
And then you made some adjustments accordingly, right? So I had my version of the deck, you made some adjustments, we kind of got more towards the central, and then I've made a few fine tunings, and we're only a couple cards apart right now.
And basically the changes have been me playing like 3 or 4 leagues of Moto in an afternoon, and then texting you in Phoenix and being like, okay, this didn't work, this worked great. Right. And so it's been a lot of like literally trying stuff to the point where, and that's like, I know I said this on the podcast, but one of the things I love about MTGO is I'm able to just like immediately be like, all right, let's see if this works.
Yeah. And if only I could do that with loop decks, but that's another story. But yeah, I'm very excited to play this deck. It's going to be weird for sure. Definitely not my normal cup of tea. As we mentioned, the Godo lines, win cons, love that, right? Do you want to highlight some of the other premier ones, Cal?
Yeah. So the main win con, obviously, like we said, is Godo with Helm. Your deck is like 1,000,001 ways to get this card onto the battlefield quickly. Then you also have, speaking of that, you have Luca. None of your creatures outside of Godo are over 3 CMC, so you're able to polymorph your Vial Smasher away into a Godo every single time. Some of the other parts of the win package is, pretty standard NAWS stuff. We're looking at a Underworld Breach package with Grinding Station that layers over top of the general plan pretty well. We also had toyed around with a few different things in this slot, and I'm still not sold on this card. But Bolas' Citadel is another win con. I haven't got to play it yet. Okay. But like it's pretty hard to be like it's not a bad card, so like it can only be so bad, right? So you have a couple different ways of winning as far as that goes. Have you
played any with Dualcaster Twin Flame?
I have not played with Dualcaster Twin Flame. My original thought was that it doesn't layer well with what the rest of the deck is doing well enough to because like one of the issues is that we're playing so many like creatures and permanent based cards that the Dualcaster doesn't double more stuff outside of the like combo very frequently.
Sure.
I don't know that it's strictly incorrect to not play, or that it's correct to not play it, but I also don't know that it's incorrect. So,
because one thing I'm noticing is like you could easily cut one card right now, right? For Dualcaster, and then Curse Mirror could just easily be a 1-for-1 swap with Heat Shimmer, right? And that's kind of like comparable. Right?
Well, and the other thing is too is like and I think that is a good point, because like I think you could make a good argument for like maybe Chance of Glory being Dualcaster Mage, off the idea that like Molten Duplication is able to just do like wear so many hats in the deck.
Right.
That was one of the things that I think is like a forgotten line of text on this card, is that it also can copy artifacts.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if you heard earlier in this, but copying Skull Clamp is really good.
Yeah, I'll trade Identification for 2 cards. It seems fine.
You will draw a lot of cards with Skull Clamp.
Yeah. So basically, the main win cons are like Breach Lines and Godo, right? Like that's the main ways to actually win the game.
And
Praetor's
like
Grasp is kind of there for that reason, right?
Praetor's Grasp is also there so that if somebody has like a 1 ring, I had this situation come up last night where I was on my win turn, clear as day, nobody had anything, everybody's F6, but somebody had just played a 1 ring, and so I had to kind of cobble together this like Praetor's Grasp win with an opponent's Thassa's Oracle and my Tainted Pact.
Right.
And I think that's just kind of like the issues of Mardu.
Right.
One of the things that I do like about this over other Mardu options is the extraordinarily clean win con that does not require you to be like casting a ton of spells.
Yeah. In the current metagame, that's like a real thing, right? With all the Ristics and Mystics running around, like an abundance of cards. Just landing 1 creature combo in your turbo deck is like, oh, wait a minute, what's happening? Right? Like, it really catches people off guard. And that's one of the things that attracted me to this list. So, like, the amount of times I'm just like, oh, okay, that's a turn 2 Godo. Like, just like easy and clean, you know? Like, you want to be playing all these rituals in the first place, as long as you can make a red pip, which turns out in turbo deck, not hard to do at all.
Turns out in a Mardu deck is not difficult.
So that's kind of the conceit of the deck. I'm going to probably, that's a new word. I'm gonna probably fudge around some numbers a little bit, see kind of like what I'm working with here on that one. I'm now kind of realizing too, we have some like really nice layering with. I might put a Goblin Engineer in just because we already have Welder and we already have Entomb.
Engineer's already on the list.
Not Engineer, sorry, Welder.
Welder.
Yeah.
This
is sick though. I'm excited to play it. It's definitely very outside of what I normally play. I'm like not an equipment guy. You know what I mean? It is just not my thing. It's not something that like scratches that itch for me. But like a 1 card creature combo thing, like that's something that like scratches it for me, you know?
Yeah. And I think I said this too, is like the way I kind of conceptualized building this was, and this is kind of how I'm going to be building like all of my red-white Ardenn decks moving forward, is it's a Godo deck that gets white for silence effects and such. And then your third color is for what effect you want. So if you want black for the consistency of like the good tutors, black's really good there. If you want blue for the protection and the card draw and a little bit more of the like grindability, Jeskai is probably like the better pairing. If you want the to the battlefield tutors, Naya is really good. But I think Ardenn really is like, I think super underexplored. And when you kind of connect the dots of, oh, this is just like a 2-card combo, I think it becomes a lot more appealing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yeah, I'm excited to see how it performs. I'm as I mentioned, a little nervous about it, but we'll see what happens. I could very much decide last minute that this is not the deck I'm going to play, but right now it's looking fun. And as I mentioned, it's like every time I'm looking at the deck, I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then I goldfish it and I'm like, nah, sex cracked. Yeah, definitely want to fudge around some of those numbers a little bit too. Also want to shout out Tales of Adventure, one of the co-sponsors of this episode. Tales of Adventure is an awesome store, and you can actually order online and get some of their product at location. I was actually able to pick up this super sick Mind Break Trap for an awesome deal at their store. So if you check out their online store, which is linked down below, and use code Comedian, you can actually get a percentage off your order. They have a crazy good inventory, and I'm really happy to have worked with them. They give good deals, great inventory, great prices, all that stuff. Check out the online shop where you can once again get percentage off using code Comedian. So here we are post tournament. I have my list in front of you. I was able to end the tournament in 9th place, which, for a smaller tournament, definitely happy to at least have made the top cut. I only had a 2-3 record, so definitely not my favorite record I've ever had making top cut in a tournament. Definitely not the performance I go for. And then I lost in the semifinals. So only 2 and 4 for the day. So definitely not my best performance on a deck. And I definitely have some stuff that I enjoyed about playing this list and some stuff that I didn't enjoy playing the list with. I found a lot of the intricacies that Cal and I were talking about in the deck tech portion to not come up as much as I would like them to. Cal was kind of in the chat with me all day, obviously not when I was during the games, but like I would chat with them between rounds. And a lot of the time I was finding that one of the central conceits of the deck that you heard Cal and I talk about was that how good Skull Clamp is, right? Unfortunately, I ran into scenarios like losing the game before I untapped for turn 2 in my first round. So that happened for sure. In last, Najila in first, they ended up only having one other blue deck in the pod. So they cracked their LED to Demonic Tutor for Breach and then just popped off with the full Breach line after their Remora got fed for 6 cards. So obviously wasn't able to get Skull Clamp down there. I had 2 grindy games where a Skull Clamp would have come in, but those were both games where Dragonshield Magistrate was out the entire game. And then I had 2 other games where I could have easily played Ardenn, played Skull Clamp, but had literally 0 targets on the board for Ardenn, so to be able to Skull Clamp. So yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that aspect of the deck, because I feel like that is one of the driving factors to push Ardenn in the command zone is the ability to clamp your opponent's creatures, right? And the fact that I felt I didn't have access to that entire dynamic throughout the tournament definitely did not make me feel great. According to other pilots of this deck, it sounds like I just had a string of bad luck, unfortunately, but it is what it is. I was still able to once again make the top 10 of this tournament with the deck. I figured I'll, go over this deck one more time, give general impressions, and then might as well break down the rest of the top 10 while I'm at it. So, as I said, the deck ended up doing pretty decently. I did really like the ability to basically have multiple tutors for Conqueror's Flail that can auto-equip to my commander, right? Conqueror's Flail ended up being the MVP for a number of games. The card is just very, very strong. I think it's insanely powerful to be able to, have that Grand Abolisher style effect. And, having a commander that had some innate synergies with it, it's pretty good. It was basically like I got a bunch of tutors for Grand Abolisher in my deck, right? So that part was kind of nice for the deck, but as I mentioned, the card advantage side of the deck and stuff like that really did not keep up with kind of what I would hope the expectation of the archetype would be, for sure. But yeah, you saw Cal and I sort of break this list down, so we don't need to talk about it much anymore. So yeah, ended the tournament in 9th. Let's talk about the other decks in the top 10. We have Cat Says Ping Meow 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 by Nico Wonderland. This is a Roxanne Starfall Savant deck. I actually played with this deck in my semifinals, and Nico is a player actually from back where I used to play a considerable amount, so I've played with them a few times. This is definitely a really cool interpretation of this brand new commander. A lot of big top end threats for this deck, and it kind of makes sense when you think about the fact that Roxanne's sort of like Gruul Kinnan, right? Unfortunately, they were in one of those games that I kind of talked about with my thing where Drannith was out super early. We got kind of locked out by PTD, unfortunately. And then, yeah, so this deck is very much focused on the Roxanne ability. A lot of high synergy pieces like Combat Celebrant giving you extra combats, Rionia, which can, go infinite with the Combat Celebrant, but also, give you more combats or more abilities of Roxanne come in, make more meteorites, stuff like that. We have Godo here, synergizing with, once again, the ability to, put Helm on Roxanne, which can really start to get out of control really fast, but also, is just a combo in its own. So this deck definitely very heavy with a lot of these Gruul top end threats. There's a lot of stuff to basically very similar to Atali, except for it's more controlling, right? It's more deal 2 damage and then ramp into more stuff later, as opposed to Atali, which is just cast everything now. We even have aggravated assault lines. This is a pretty sick deck. And then obviously Food Chain and Squee and also Temur Sabertooth and Dockside allow you to infinitely cast your commander over and over again, and with her having the enter the battlefield ability to deal 2 to your opponent, that's just a win con on its own. So this deck definitely has a lot of different layering to it. This one is definitely chock full of win conditions, so that part's pretty cool. But yeah, it looks a lot like Atali in the shell of having things like Jaxis and Treasonous Ogre, and this one's even got Kiki lines, so there's a lot of win cons packed into this one deck for sure. Even dual caster, Molten Duplication, Heat Shimmer lines, which is pretty sick. So congrats to our pilot for making the top cut with this super spicy deck as well. We had Jay Hines here with an Atraxa list. not too many crazy differences. We're seeing Hullbreaker Horror in this version of the deck, which I do think is something that some Atrax pilots have been talking about historically, but I haven't seen. So I really appreciate the inclusion of Hullbreaker Horror. It's like, if you're going to cast 1/7 drop threat, might as well have a second one that can just straight up win the game at certain points. So that part's pretty cool. And then apart from that, it's a pretty standard Atraxa list here. You know, got the food chain lines, got the Thoracle Consult stuff. Pretty normal Atraxa. As you know, we've kind of done like half a deck tech in this video, so I'm definitely not going to spend as much time going over the nitty-gritty details of some of these decks that I normally would. But we're definitely going to at least take the time to review them because, you know, we're at the tournament. These are the decks that did well, and we're going to talk about it. We have Ganesh here with their blue farm list. This is pretty standard blue farm. Ganesh is a pretty well-known, at this point, blue farm player. Been playing blue farm in a lot of these online tournaments, and here they are doing it again. This one's on the Necropotence lines. If you don't know blue farm at this point, it's one of the most represented decks in the entire format and one of the most consistent performing ones. So here we have Ganesh playing the deck that they always play, doing it again. King's Kitten 2 by PTD. This is PTD's infamous, maybe famous Kenrith list that they're kind of known for playing. Very Displacer Kitten focused in the sense that it has lines with Displacer and Luris. It has lines with Displacer and Teferi, like we talked about in the last deck. Yeah, and a bunch of other stuff too. There's Thoracle lines in here too. Deadeye lines with Dockside Extortionist, along with Emil as well. So definitely a lot of Kenrith focused synergies. Then you kind of get some of the stuff like Intuition, stuff like that to assemble your Underworld Breach lines, have some value enchantments like Smothering Tide, and Survival of the Fittest to assemble a lot of the combos with Kenrith. There's also the ability to combo off with Kenrith, Mayhem Devil, and Dockside, which is also another layered combo in the deck. So pretty standard Kenrith stuff, but PTD continuing to put up results with the deck that they've been playing for quite some time. We have Foshizit, Niv Mizzet by Kendall Bodal. This is a Niv Perun control deck. Kind of interesting inclusions here with this one. We don't see Thada in a lot of Niv lists, at least that I've seen. Sometimes they top off with that Nezahal threat too, so that doesn't seem to be pretty present in this one. This one's only on 2 sorceries, which I definitely am not used to, but obviously then we go down to the instants. We got 39 instants here with this Niv list. You know, the Niv thing is like pretty explored at this point in the sense that it's like, yeah, you play a lot of instants, you play a few pieces to slow your opponents down, and then some value creatures here and there. You kind of rely on Dockside a little bit with Displacer Kitten lines, and then yeah, you get your value with your Niv and kind of go from there. We have Zach Smith here with a Najeela list. This is pretty classic Turbo Najeela stuff. Very much the iconic speed needs no translation type of list. We do have a War Leader's Call in this version, which does seem to be more and more popular as time goes on for Najeela list. I think that card's gonna be sticking around. But I also said that this was very similar to speed needs no translation, but this is a lot of the breach lines with Najeela, but no ad nauseum stuff. And also we have like a Bramblewood Paragon here in the deck, so definitely a few more value warriors than the stereotypical Najeela list. This kind of feels like a hybrid of the mid-range list that's starting to pop up more and more, and the, you know, more intuition based explosive version that was around for a little bit of time. I should say a reasonable amount of time. We have Spin Doctors here. I'm not like other Tivits. This is in fact like other Tivits. Yeah, this is like a very iconic classic Tivit list. Got a lot of stuff going on that we know and love in Tivit. You're winning with Time Sieve, you're playing your value engines. You have your, once again, Displacer Kitten Teferi lines, like all of these decks seem to have in this tournament. And then the rest of it's pretty classic Tivit Esper control stuff. We have our Timnacrom cEDH by Boza 92. This is a Delny version of Blue Farm in the sense that it is Blue Farm and they're playing Delny with a couple cards that synergize it, right? With Lotho, Dockside, Esper, technically Thoracle, but not the most amount of synergy there. But you know, some folks who've been testing Delny have been really happy with it, so that's pretty cool. We have Value Reanimate here in the spiced slot here for Blue Farm, but apart from that, pretty standard Blue Farm. No Necropotence in this version. 26 lands, pretty slim. That's about the craziness we're seeing from this one. And the winner of our tournament, which you know, it always does make me feel good to lose in the semis to the person who wins the whole thing. So Frostfire, congratulations on winning this tournament here with Magda Brazen Outlaw. I was unaware that they're playing Luca in this version. That's so interesting. Is it because, I'm so fascinated to know what the Luca's in here for. Okay, yeah. Drossfire, if you end up watching this video, please let me know, because Luca is very, very spicy. But yeah, the classic Magda lines are all here with this one. I actually ended up playing against this deck, as I mentioned, and losing to it in the semifinals. They had a very explosive start, and then unfortunately, PTT's Draenith locked both myself and the Roxanne player out of interacting with what was happening here. But yeah, Magda's been showing up pretty consistent lately and putting up pretty decent results with a number of different pilots, right? It's a deck that has a lot of flexibility in some of the inclusions, and good Magda pilots are able to course correct and tutor for the right things at the right times, and get advantage by doing so, right? The deck is definitely one that rewards people who play it pretty consistently and who are experienced in knowing what to tutor for at what time. So it's a deck that definitely can pay off, and it's pretty cool to see a mono red deck consistently perform in cEDH in a format where, a lot of people say you really need blue to succeed. So pretty sweet stuff, and congrats to our pilot Drossfire on the win here. As I said, Mardu Vial Smasher is not the deck for me, but that's okay. I think Ardenn Vial is a really cool archetype. I definitely suggest folks give it a shot if they're interested in the Ardenn style deck and don't want to do the classic like Staxier versions, right? This version is definitely very explosive. Got to do cool stuff like, polymorphing into a Godo. As I mentioned, unfortunately, I feel like I got a couple. It was one of those days where I was like, it feels like everything that should go wrong in a scenario is the thing that's going wrong, right? In the sense that, yeah, just a lot of stuff like that was the worst possible outcome was happening. So, it's hard to say. I don't want to judge the deck too much on what feels like a rough day of performance, but I definitely feel like I was always kind of missing that thing that makes it feel broken, right? Like every cEDH deck has that thing that makes it feel broken to me. And this deck felt like it was fair a lot of the time, and that's usually not what I'm looking for on a list. I do think it's still a super viable list. I think you can take it and play it and do pretty decently with it, but as I mentioned, it's not my particular cup of tea. And if I'm working in the Mardu Turbo space, I'm probably doing something different. If I'm working in the Ardenn space, I'm probably doing something different. So, glad to have tried it, glad to have experimented with the list, but yeah, not for me, but that's okay. What do y'all think of this deck? Is there anything that stuck out to you as far as inclusions? I know like Pip-Boy actually impressed me a decent amount when I was playing. I don't know how much that can translate to other lists that exist in cEDH, but that and Mask of Memory both definitely put in some work. So definitely cards that I'm like, okay, I'm not normally an equipment guy, but maybe things like that are at least worth considering in decks that go to combat a pretty decent amount. So, there's always lessons to be learned when you try and experiment with new archetypes. And even in situations like this one where it's like, no, I definitely won't play this again, I'm glad I still got the experience to try something and to expand my horizons, try a different strategy and stuff like that. So not every experiment's a success, but I'm glad I experimented in the first place, and I do feel like I have learned stuff by playing this archetype, so it's pretty sweet. Let me know any comments y'all have down below. Thank you so much.